Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Olga sighed as she placed the heavy bags on the table. Had she really managed to carry them home by herself? Her hands were burning, and her fingers wouldn't straighten. Olga immediately went to the sink and turned on the water, putting her hands under the cool stream. Oh, that feels so good. Standing by the sink, Olga looked at the bags. She furrowed. Today was payday. Usually, her husband, Sergio, would pick her up after work on payday, and they would go to the supermarket to stock up on essential groceries for the month. However, today, Olga couldn't reach him, and he didn't even call her back. She expected him to wait for her when she left the office, but his car was nowhere to be seen, so Olga went to the store by herself. Of course, she bought a lot, hoping that Sergio would call. But his phone was still off, and Olga had to take a taxi home with these heavy bags. The taxi driver was unpleasant. He grumbled when Olga asked for help putting the bags in the trunk, and he refused to help her carry the bags even to the elevator, despite her offer to pay extra. "What am I, a porter for you? I don't need your extra money. My job is to get you to your destination, and you can handle the rest yourself. Besides, my back hurts," the taxi driver complained. It was a good thing the elevator had been fixed yesterday. If it hadn't, Olga wouldn't have been able to carry the bags up to the 7th floor. Well, either she would have managed or she would have hurt her back or hands in the process. Lord! Where's Sergio? Damn him! And then Olga heard the sound of the front door opening. Well, there he is, finally. Sergio walked into the kitchen a minute later. His face showed calm and serenity, unlike Olga's expression. She looked at him, squinting, and said sarcastically, "Hello, you're right on time." Sergio looked puzzled at his wife, as if he couldn't understand what she meant. "Why are you giving me that look? Did you forget what day it is today? You were supposed to pick me up so we could go to the supermarket together, but you didn't answer the phone all day. I called and called, but nothing. What happened?" Sergio guiltily looked at the bags on the table. "Oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot to call you. I had an urgent work assignment, and my boss asked me to handle it. I couldn't refuse him. I've been busy all day, and I didn't even check my phone. It must have run out of batteries." Sergio took out his phone from his pocket and exclaimed, "Yes, it's completely dead. I'm so sorry, I've had a really long and tiring day. Let's eat something, and we can plan our budget. Then I'll go to bed early. I have to get up early again tomorrow." Sergio headed to the bathroom while Olga watched him suspiciously. Something didn't seem right. He looked too fresh and well-rested. Olga's thoughts turned to her suspicions about a possible affair. Olga had been closely observing her husband's behavior for a while now. They had been together for many years, and she had gotten to know him thoroughly. Any slight changes in his habits and behavior didn't escape her notice. He had been acting strangely for over 6 months, often disappearing somewhere. During those moments, he would meticulously choose his clothes and spend a long time in front of the mirror. Olga wasn't overly jealous to question him about his whereabouts every time he left. But when it happened more frequently, she couldn't help but ask, "Where do you keep going in the evenings?" "On business, Olga, on business. You know I'm a businessman. I have a lot of acquaintances I need to consult with. It's only thanks to this that I can successfully manage our finances," her husband would reply. By business, he meant his passion, which he had developed a few years ago. After they bought their apartment, they split their finances evenly, and Sergio started investing. Olga didn't understand much about it, but trusted her husband, so she allowed him to handle all their financial matters. In her family, it was normal, so Olga didn't worry. Sergio seemed smart and prudent. Every month, he would happily tell his wife how successfully he had conducted various financial operations, and Olga was pleased that her husband was so resourceful. According to his calculations, if they continued to invest a certain amount of money each month, they would have enough savings by retirement to do nothing but travel for the rest of their lives. Sometimes Olga would bring up the topic of children. They had decided not to have children right after their wedding. It was better to establish stability first. Going on maternity leave would mean they couldn't save as much, and raising a child would require additional expenses, which would hinder their ability to save money. Olga agreed, but as time passed and their financial situation stabilized, they still hadn't started planning for children. Olga, it's not the right time. We need a substantial financial safety net, you understand? I'm not sure yet if we're capable enough, it's not possible right now. That's how he would respond to her question about having a child, and everything continued as before. So, have you prepared dinner? Olga heard Sergio's voice coming from the bedroom. No, I'll let you know when dinner is ready, Olga shouted back. She gazed sadly at the bags and sighed. She felt tired today. In fact, she was tired of the constant hustle and bustle, budget planning, and weekly menu preparations. More and more, she just wanted to get her paycheck and enjoy it, go out to a cafe, have some delicious pastries, or go shopping. She longed to come home, put the money in one place, and not worry about dividing it into different piles. 10 minutes later, dinner was ready, and the couple sat down at the table. They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Olga didn't know what her husband was thinking, but his face showed such contentment. Clearly, she wasn't the reason for his happy smile. Olga again thought he had a lover. What if she was right? What if he really had someone else? Olga didn't want to believe it, but there were many signs pointing in that direction. After dinner, Sergio, rubbing his hands together, said cheerfully, "Well, let's get to it." This phrase meant they were going to plan their budget now. Olga cleared the table, and Sergio took out a thick notebook and a calculator from his desk. Olga suggested using a smartphone app for calculations, but Sergio insisted that all financial calculations had to be done on a calculator. These are not toys, Olga, this is serious business. Every month, Olga handed over her entire paycheck to her husband. He combined it with his own salary, and then he meticulously calculated in his notebook how much they needed for food, bills, daily expenses, and essential purchases or entertainment. Everything was written down. Sergio took all the remaining money for himself. He always put this money in a special account and then invested it. Olga had never seen the actual process. She trusted her husband completely. Initially, these monthly calculations brought them joy. They both felt the physical growth of their safety net. However, over time, this process began to feel routine. Now, Olga was starting to worry. Part of it was because she suspected him of infidelity. However, there were no clear pieces of evidence, and Olga hadn't sounded the alarm yet. The calculations took almost half an hour, and then her husband neatly stacked the money for their monthly savings, put them in his wallet, and declared, "Tomorrow, I'll deposit them in the account." Olga washed the dishes, tidied up the kitchen, and then took a shower. When she entered the bedroom, Sergio was already snoring, facing away from her. Yes, it had been a few months of silence in their bedroom. In fact, their passion and desire had faded for about a year now. They still made love, but it felt dull, quick, and routine. Olga would even say that their relationship had grown stale. Perhaps this was a phase that all long-term couples went through, but Olga believed it had happened too soon for them. She lay down in bed and immediately closed her eyes. She needed to put all her problems aside for tomorrow and get a good night's sleep. The next day, Olga finished work early and decided not to go home immediately. She had planned to go to the shopping center with her husband on the weekend to look for a winter jacket, but Olga didn't want to wait until Saturday. She tried calling her husband to let him know, but once again, he didn't pick up the phone. "Recently, you've become too busy, Sergio," Olga whispered to herself. She decided not to call him anymore. Why add unnecessary stress? Olga was sure she would get home before him. She went to a large shopping center with many stores. Sometimes, some of these stores had great discounts. Olga loved this shopping complex. When she entered through the main entrance, it felt like stepping into another world. Everything here was so festive, elegant, and sometimes quite expensive. She enjoyed the noise and the buzz of voices. Men and women were walking around, carrying bags filled with purchases. She wished she could also stroll around carefree, buying whatever she wanted. But usually, Olga only came here for a specific item from a specific store. Occasionally, she allowed herself to wander around the complex, peering into all the shops and pretending that she could buy anything. Sometimes she even tried on some expensive, luxurious items that were currently beyond her reach. Today, she felt like going into the first store. Olga sighed and merged into the crowd. She casually entered almost every store, one after another. Looking at the beautiful clothing, she sadly thought about the remaining portion of her salary, which her husband had invested. With that money, she could buy several very decent items. Maybe even that expensive handbag she really liked. Olga smiled lightly at herself while trying on the handbag. Oh, how good she looked with it! But she had nowhere to go with it. She and her husband rarely went anywhere, and it was too fancy for everyday use. Olga glanced into a store that sold winter jackets. She didn't find anything suitable for herself and exited the store, heading to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. On her way, she stopped by a shop selling fur products. Right on display was the fur coat that had caught her eye. She wanted to take another look at it. Olga stopped in front of the display, but the coat was gone. There was only a mannequin in its place. What a shame, someone must have bought it already. Olga looked inside the store with disappointment. She saw a woman trying on a fur coat, the same one that Olga had admired. Next to the woman was presumably her husband. It seemed he was sponsoring the purchase of this expensive item. The woman looked at herself in the mirror and then smiled at her companion. The man turned to say something to her, and Olga realized it was her husband. Sergio was standing right there. He smiled at the woman, nodded, and examined her from head to toe. It was clear that he approved of her choice. Olga couldn't believe her eyes. The woman threw her arms around Sergio's neck, and he hugged her. It was evident that the purchase was going to happen because her husband took out his wallet. Olga took a few steps back from the display, continuing to observe her husband and this woman, and then turned and walked away. She went downstairs to the first floor and left the shopping center. She didn't wait for public transport. She got into the first taxi she found in a small parking lot. As she rode home, she tried to regain her composure. It was only when she got home that Olga fully understood what was happening. She had been right. Her husband had a lover, and he was taking her shopping. He was buying her the fur coat that Olga had liked. He was using the money they had saved, while Olga had to go shopping and just watch. Sergio was spending money on this woman, and his wife couldn't even keep a portion of her paycheck to buy herself something. After all, her husband said they needed to save, gather money, and multiply their capital. For what? So he could spend that money on another woman? That was an interesting turn of events. Olga poured herself a glass of water and sat down at the table. She was thinking about her married life. What else could she boast about? They lived quietly and peacefully, yes. But was that really good, as it was generally considered? It seemed that a quiet and peaceful life often led to a husband seeking adventures elsewhere, didn't it? Or had he just grown tired of living with Olga? Or had he fallen in love with this woman? And what made this woman better than Olga? She appeared to be about the same age as Olga, and her appearance was nothing out of the ordinary, except that Olga was a natural blonde and the woman had dark hair. And her figure wasn't particularly remarkable, no striking curves that could captivate a man. So, was this the end of their married life? Olga had no intention of silently enduring her husband's infidelity, and she didn't really want to create a scene either. It was time to have an honest conversation with him, which she had planned to do when he came home. Sergio arrived home only after 2 hours. He calmly greeted his wife and said, "I was delayed again today. There was something very important and urgent." "Yes, very important. I understand. Such matters can't be postponed, and on this, I completely agree with you." It's better to take care of them immediately rather than being late, Olga retorted right away. Sergio frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, that's what I mean. Buying a fur coat is a very urgent matter. If you like a fur coat, you need to buy it right away, or someone else might. Just like what happened to me. I really wanted that fur coat and often came to look at it. And then I came, and, poof, some other woman was trying it on. And her man was buying her that fur coat. That's it. I don't have my favorite item anymore, the one I had my eye on for so long. It's such a disappointment, don't you agree?" Sergio turned even paler but didn't say anything. He just stared at Olga. Olga watched him for a few minutes and then turned away to pour herself some coffee. Finally, Sergio broke the silence. "Did you see us?" Olga turned to him again. "Did you think I was telling you about a scene from a movie? Of course, I saw you, and I saw everything very clearly. I believe it's better for you to tell me the truth, as I already understand everything. I hope you have the courage not to lie to me. I think I deserve to know the unvarnished truth, don't you?" Sergio sighed, his face regained its color, and he wasn't as scared as he was at first. Evidently, he realized Olga wouldn't make a scene. Sergio sat down at the table and asked evenly, without looking at his wife, "What do you want to know?" Olga had a flurry of questions in her head, and she didn't immediately decide what to ask him. "Is she your lover?" she finally uttered. "Yes," Sergio replied shortly. "How long have you been together?" "About a year and a half." Olga swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat. "Were you planning to tell me about her?" Sergio hesitated slightly but then answered, "No, not really, at least not in the near future. If she had demanded it, then yes, I would have told you." Olga closed her eyes. It was serious between them. If this woman wanted to be with him all the time, she could easily make that happen. Everything was clear, she didn't want to know more. She wanted to ask if he loved her, but she changed her mind. What was the point of such questions when everything was already clear? She sighed and said, "Well, in that case, there's only one way out. I believe we need to get a divorce. What do you think about that?" Sergio looked into her eyes. Olga was very surprised by what she saw in his eyes. There was no regret, sorrow, or unhappiness. There was fear, a certain kind of fear, not the fear of losing his wife, but something else. Olga couldn't understand why Sergio reacted this way. At first, she thought he didn't want to lose his family, but then Sergio said, "Yes, maybe that's for the best. If you want to, let's get a divorce." Olga understood that this was the end. It hurt, but it was better to be alone than with a husband who was unfaithful. She couldn't say she felt great love for Sergio, but they had lived together for years, and everything had always been good between them. They satisfied each other in bed, although the passion had faded recently. Perhaps that's what happens when love starts to wane. She would have continued to live with him since everything was fine with her. But if he had a lover, then something in their marriage must not have been fine for him. Olga thought they were a family, but it turned out their marriage had been falling apart for a long time, at least a year and a half, she was sure. It was better to end it now, as unpleasant and painful as it might be. Olga blinked so as not to burst into tears. "All right, let's discuss all the details right away. We need to figure out how we'll handle our assets." "Assets?" Sergio repeated slowly, and Olga saw that fear in his eyes again. "Yes, assets and our money," Olga confidently replied. "Money?" Sergio repeated. Olga frowned. Why was he getting so nervous? What was happening? "Maybe we can discuss all of that later." "I'm very tired today," her husband said. His behavior was suspicious, and Olga immediately decided to get to the bottom of it. "Tired? Tired of what? Picking out a fur coat for your mistress? I mean, of course, it's such a serious task that it requires your full attention." "No, we'll discuss everything now. Besides, there's nothing to discuss. I've already found the optimal solution." Even two. All you have to do is choose. We don't have children, which simplifies the divorce process. We just need to divide the apartment and the money. Here's what I propose. I'll keep the apartment and you can have all the money we've saved. Or, conversely, you keep the apartment and you give me all the money. Based on my rough estimates, since you don't show me your financial records, there should be enough savings for me to buy a similar apartment. I believe this is the fairest way, and it won't take us much time to finalize the divorce if we agree on everything amicably. Olga looked at Sergio questioningly, but he turned even paler. Olga started to suspect that something was off. Why are you silent? Don't know which option to choose? Well, take until tomorrow to think about it, and then let me know. But there's no point in taking too long. I don't mind which option you choose, I'm fine with either. There's no need to think, unfortunately, we only have one option. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. You see, we can only split the apartment in half, and that's it. We don't have anything else, Sergio slowly explained. What do you mean, just the apartment? What about the money? Do you want us to go through the court for that? You realize that I'll still get half, but all of this will only prolong the divorce process, Olga said angrily. She thought he was trying to make it difficult for her, but what Sergio said next was something she never expected to hear. We have no money. We won't be able to divide them because there are none left. I lost everything, Olga. We lost everything. I made a bad investment and I lost all our savings. I'm sorry, but I didn't know how to tell you. Olga jumped up from her chair, leaned on the table with her hands, and leaned over her husband with her whole body. What? Are you joking? How is that possible? Do you realize what you've done? Those were all our savings. Every month, I gave you my entire salary. I sacrificed so much for us. You never even bought me any extravagant gifts, and I was okay with that. I hope that soon we'd be able to afford everything. I trusted you, Sergio. What have you done? Sergio shrank back. He looked at his wife cautiously, expecting her to attack him physically, but Olga only pounded her fists on the table. When her hands began to hurt, she slumped back into her chair. Now she couldn't hold back her tears. It was so unfair and cruel. She had hoped that by saving money every month, she was securing her future, but now all the money had vanished into thin air. Her husband turned out to not be as smart as she thought. After a few minutes, she managed to say, I'll never forgive you for this. You not only ruined my life today, but also destroyed all my hopes for a better future. Sergio remained silent, and Olga glared at him with anger. Well, now we have only one option left. We have to divide the apartment. I can't imagine how to do it correctly, but we have no other choice. You left us no choice. We'll discuss everything else later. I want to go to sleep. My head is pounding. If you want dinner, you can find something in the fridge yourself. As long as our fridge and food are shared, you can look for something there. And you'll sleep in the living room from now on. I'll sleep in the bedroom alone. I won't object if you go live with your mistress if she has a place of her own. She doesn't have her own place, she's renting, Sergio replied gloomily. Olga smirked. Why didn't you find a wealthy mistress? Or maybe you're just not what she needs now. Of course, you have no money left. What can she take from you? And about the fur coat you bought today, on what money was that, I wonder? Sergio quietly replied. Those weren't my own funds, I borrowed them. Olga raised her eyebrows. Borrowed? Well, you're a fool. Well, now you're stuck with your debt. That's it, I'm tired of talking to you. I'm going to sleep. And Olga went into the bedroom. She tossed and turned in bed for a long time that night, trying to come to terms with what was happening to her. In just one day, she had lost everything, her family, her husband, her money, and almost her apartment because now they would have to share it. She was afraid to imagine what would happen to her next. Olga and Sergio divorced quickly. Olga couldn't wait to start living separately from Sergio. During the entire divorce process, he continued to live with her in the same apartment. Olga didn't understand why he didn't move in with his mistress. As soon as they received their divorce certificate and property division documents, he packed his things and moved out. They divided the apartment equally, one part belonged to Olga and the other to her ex-husband. It was unclear how to proceed from there. Olga wanted to buy Sergio's share, but she didn't have the money now. If Sergio wanted to buy Olga's part, she wouldn't agree because she couldn't afford to buy anything decent with that money. She didn't want to lose the cozy and spacious apartment. When he moved out, Olga sighed with relief, thinking that the apartment issue would be resolved somehow. However, she was in for a surprise she hadn't expected. A month after Sergio left, the doorbell rang. Olga opened the door and saw an unfamiliar woman. She looked at Olga with a hint of provocation. Her face seemed vaguely familiar to Olga, as if she had met this woman before, but she couldn't quite recall where. "Hello, is there something you wanted?" Olga asked politely. "Yes, I wanted to." "I need to talk to you," the woman replied without greeting. Olga frowned. "What is it that you want to talk to me about?" "It's about the apartment," the stranger replied. Olga thought this might be Sergio's lawyer, coming to discuss the next steps regarding the apartment. She invited the woman inside. The woman entered briskly, casually took off her shoes, and then she began to walk through the entire apartment as if she were there for an inspection. While she peeked into the kitchen, bathroom, and living room, Olga remained silent, unsure of how to react. But when the woman entered her bedroom, Olga couldn't hold back any longer. "Who gave you permission to roam everywhere? I don't understand who you are. Introduce yourself and tell me what you want. Was it my ex-husband who told you to come here?" Olga said angrily. The woman leisurely approached her and said, "Let's go to the kitchen, we can discuss everything there." Without waiting for Olga to go first, the woman walked into the kitchen herself. Olga reluctantly followed. "I'll say it again, tell me who you are. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave," Olga insisted. The woman sat down at the table, crossed her legs, placed her purse on the table, and then looked at Olga. She raised her head proudly and said, "To my delight and your regret, you can't dismiss me. Because I am the rightful owner of half of this apartment." Olga turned pale. She couldn't understand what was happening. "Who are you, for heaven's sake? And what nonsense are you talking about? I'll call the police right now, and they'll throw you out of here. My name is Sofia Santos, and your husband has transferred his rights to half of this apartment to me. I came to inform you that I plan to move in here and live in my lawful half," the woman explained. Suddenly, Olga remembered where she had seen this woman before. She had seen her at the fur store. She was Sergio's mistress, the one for whom he had bought the fur coat Olga had dreamed of. So, did she come to live here? "This is absurd." "I don't understand you," Olga whispered. Sofia started to get annoyed. "Oh, for God's sake. You're slow, aren't you? What's not to understand? He practically sold me his rightful half of this apartment. Now, I have the same rights to it as you do. And I intend to live here. I'm informing you in advance so that you have time to vacate the room that used to be your husband's office. Your bedroom is a bit larger, but I don't like how the window is placed there. I prefer another room, and that's where I'll be living. As for the living room, kitchen, and bathroom, we'll take turns using them. It'll be convenient, don't you think?" Olga realized that Sofia wasn't joking. This woman was indeed asserting her rights. "No, you will not live here. I won't allow it. Go live with my ex-husband, Sofia. I won't let you in here." Sofia smiled sweetly and said, "My name is Sofia Santos, and I didn't give you the right to call me by my first name only. You can address me only as Sofia Santos and nothing else. It's my personal business, who I live with and where. At the moment, I intend to live right here. In a week, my furniture and bags will be delivered, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. If you try to interfere, I'll have to come here with legal representatives." Olga was left speechless. What was happening? Had this audacious woman come here to assert some legal rights? How was this even possible? How had she managed to obtain a share of the apartment that belonged to her ex-husband? I see you're shocked by my announcement. But I can't help you with that. I will be living here, and that's the end of it, due to certain circumstances. Who knows, maybe I won't like it here and won't stay. Or something else might happen. In any case, I'll be moving in with my belongings next Saturday. Sophia got up, grabbed her purse, and left without saying another word, slamming the door loudly. Olga was sitting there for a long time, staring blankly. Then she called her ex-husband, but he didn't answer the phone. Olga called a friend whose husband worked in the police department. She learned about her situation from her friend. After some time, the friend called back and said that Olga could take her ex-husband to court, but it would be a lengthy process. She couldn't legally evict the audacious mistress if the woman indeed owned a part of the apartment. Olga realized she was losing this battle. What could she do now? A month passed, and her ex-husband still hadn't answered her calls. Sophia moved in with Olga. She barely spoke about Olga's ex-husband, but Olga was sure they had something sinister planned. Sophia was acting strangely. While she initially came across as simply audacious, her behavior took a different turn as they began living together. Olga frequently noticed odd behaviors from Sophia, and it made her uncomfortable. She even tried to avoid the kitchen to minimize meeting her. Sophia's peculiarities manifested themselves in various ways. For example, she placed small glasses with scented sticks inside them all around the kitchen. Before that, she walked around the apartment with 2 glasses. The only room she didn't enter was Olga's bedroom, as she had strictly forbidden it. Before Sophia's arrival, Olga even installed a lock on the bedroom door to prevent unauthorized entry. Sophia Santos, why did you fill the entire house with these stick stench? It's unbearable. What's all this about? Olga asked. Sophia only chuckled and replied seriously. Don't laugh it off, Olga. I know a lot about these things. I'm a witch, and our knowledge is passed down through generations. People often seek my help. Not only can I cleanse a home or a person of evil spirits, but I can also cast curses myself. I can sense that there's something not quite right with the energy in this apartment. Olga frowned, thinking she was talking nonsense. However, stranger things began happening. Olga frequently found peculiar items in the most unexpected places. For instance, she found a piece of black leather in a box of laundry detergent and a bundle of unfamiliar dried herbs in her makeup bag. Olga couldn't fathom where these items came from. When she asked Sophia about them, she would simply shrug and say, "Don't ask silly questions, Olga. There's nothing for me to tell you. I told you something strange is happening in this apartment. I can feel it." However, when Olga found a clump of dark hair tied with a string and a dry twig in her jeans pocket, she couldn't hold herself back any longer. "I told you not to go through my things. Can't you understand that? Are you a complete idiot?" Sophia continued to behave audaciously, claiming that she was doing it for the greater good. "Look at you. You're acting like a crazy person. I place these items where there's a lot of negative energy. I just want the house to have its own energy," she explained. "What kind of energy are you talking about? You're getting on my nerves. You came into my home, invaded my space, and now you're doing all this weird stuff. What do you want from me, you lunatic?" Olga raged. Sophia got angry in return and raised her voice. "You! What right do you have to insult me like this? I do as I want. And if you want to get rid of me, sell your share and go your own way. But if you keep insulting me and undermining my authority, I'll cast a curse on you. Yes, don't look so surprised. It's the plain truth. I can do anything, and I will if you provoke me. So, that's what it's all about?" Olga realized why this woman had moved here. They planned to take away the one thing Olga had left, her rightful share of the apartment. Sophia had been sent by her ex-husband to execute their plan, or perhaps Sophia herself had devised this scheme and persuaded Sergio to transfer his part of the apartment to her. Olga couldn't believe the kind of man her ex-husband had turned out to be. As for this woman, she was like a witch. Olga needed to be cautious around them. She was slightly scared of everything that was happening. What if this woman could actually do all the things she claimed? Her strange actions spoke for themselves. What if she was genuinely leaving these bizarre items to cast a curse on her? Olga didn't believe in any of this, but what if it were true? What if they were planning something terrible? She couldn't show her fears to this witch. She needed to approach this differently and come up with a plan. Olga laughed as naturally as she could, even though it was quite challenging. What nonsense are you talking about? What curse? I don't believe in all this. It's just made up to scare people. Impressive people believe it and come up with even more nonsense. But I'm not one of those people. I'm a rational person, and I couldn't care less about your words. You're just a foolish woman, that's all. You won't scare me, and you won't make me voluntarily sell my share of the apartment, no matter how hard you try. Sophia turned purple with anger and rage. She didn't expect such an aggressive response from her former lover's ex-wife. Oh, you don't care? Well then, let's see how you react after I prove everything to you. Since you've spoken to me this way, remember this, I won't be nice to you anymore. I offered you a peaceful solution and wanted to settle everything amicably, but you started this. How dare you laugh at me? I won't let this go. Get ready. And Sophia stormed off to her room, leaving Olga deep in thought. Perhaps she should be cautious of this woman. If she and Sergio were planning something, Olga couldn't trust them, and she needed to protect herself somehow. Then Olga pondered something else. What if her ex-husband hadn't been entirely truthful? What if he hadn't lost all the money they had saved together over the years? What if he was just trying to pocket everything for himself? And now he wanted to claim the apartment too? It could be true. Olga realized that Sergio and this woman were capable of anything. If this were true, Olga needed to start worrying. She didn't believe that her ex-husband's mistress was truly a witch or a sorceress, as she claimed. However, she could be a criminal who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Her eyes reflected malice and greed. Yes, there had to be more to her constant presence next to Olga than just acquiring a share of the apartment. Olga decided she needed to be cautious, and the best way to keep an eye on her uninvited housemate was to install a security camera. This would allow her to monitor Sophia's actions and have evidence in case it was needed. The cost was high for Olga, given her current situation, but she believed it was worth it. When Sophia was not at home, the technician installed the camera, and it took about 20 minutes to complete the task. Olga was anxious that Sophia might return unexpectedly. To cover their tracks, they had prepared the story that they were there to check the utility meters. Olga had warned the technician about this, and everything went smoothly. The camera was placed in the kitchen, and Sophia remained unaware of it. Later that evening, while Olga was preparing dinner, Sophia suddenly appeared. She brewed herself a cup of coffee and leisurely sipped the hot liquid, keeping a watchful eye on Olga. Olga grew annoyed and said, "Why are you staring at me? Got nothing better to do?" "I want to, so I'm looking. I'm just as much the mistress of this place as you are. There's no need for you to dictate where I can look and where I can't," Sophia replied. Olga didn't respond. While she was cooking dinner, she kept a watchful eye on Sophia, who occasionally cast a penetrating gaze at Olga's coffee cup. It looked suspicious. Olga finished her dinner, and Sophia continued to sit nearby, engrossed in her phone. However, she occasionally glanced at the cup on the table. Olga washed her dishes and then decided to leave the kitchen to see what Sophia would do in her absence. She went to the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the water. She spent a few minutes washing her hands before exiting the bathroom. Sophia was still seated in the kitchen, looking content. Olga picked up her coffee cup and said, "You're bothering me. I'll go enjoy my coffee in my room," and she left, taking the cup with her. Sophia remained in the kitchen. Olga locked herself in her room and opened her computer. She found a program that allowed her to access the camera's recordings. The footage was stored for a total of 48 hours, as the technician had mentioned. Olga decided to rewind the recording by 10 minutes. She played it back at a slightly accelerated speed. After a few minutes, she saw something that shocked her. Sophia had waited for Olga to enter the bathroom and then immediately approached Olga's coffee cup. From her pocket, she took out a small packet containing bright blue capsules. Sophia opened one capsule and emptied its contents into Olga's coffee. Then she put the packet with the capsules back into her pocket. Sophia picked up a sushi stick and stirred the coffee thoroughly before sniffing it. Apparently, she was satisfied with the result. She broke the stick and put it in her pocket as well before returning to her seat. Olga stared at the coffee cup in horror. It was a nightmare. She had added something to her coffee. She wanted to poison her. Olga covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a scream. What should she have done now? Olga watched the recording again and again, at least 10 times, until her fear and shock subsided. During the watching of that scene, she finally regained her composure. She had to take action. She wouldn't let these two schemers, her ex-husband and his mistress, deceive her or harm her in any way. Olga decided that she would outsmart them and get what she deserved. First, she saved the recording by sending it to her work email and saving a copy on her computer. After thinking for a few minutes, she also copied it onto a flash drive. Now, she had 3 copies of the recording stored in different places. That was a good start. Next, Olga considered what to do with the poisoned coffee. She certainly wouldn't drink it, but how could she make Sophia believe that she had consumed every drop? And what had Sophia added to the coffee? It probably wasn't lethal. They wanted to scare Olga rather than kill her. Or perhaps they wanted her to get sick without knowing the cause. Olga relied on her intuition. She looked at the coffee cup again and whispered almost inaudibly to herself. Unbelievable, how can this be happening to me? It's like I'm in a thriller. Then, Olga pulled herself together. She couldn't let herself relax. She needed to act, and she needed to do it right now. She surveyed her surroundings. How could she dispose of the poisoned liquid without arousing suspicion? Sophia would notice whether Olga left the room with an empty cup or not. She examined everything closely. And then she spotted an almost empty bottle of body lotion on the shelf. Olga decided to use it. She played some music to cover up any noise and opened the bottle. She carefully poured the coffee into the bottle, leaving only a tiny bit at the bottom. She wiped the spilled liquid with a tissue and tightly closed the bottle. Then, Olga took a small bottle of disinfectant from the shelf and poured a little onto the table. She wiped the table meticulously. She couldn't take any chances that Sophia had touched it. Maybe Olga wasn't supposed to touch it either? Then Olga took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror hanging on the wall. She didn't appear scared, but there was a slight sense of unease on her face, and she looked pale. That was just perfect for her plan. Olga took an empty cup and went to the kitchen, where Sophia was still sitting. When Sophia saw Olga, her gaze initially darted to the cup, but then she began to scrutinize Olga intently. She noticed that Olga placed the empty cup in the sink. There was a triumphant look on Sophia's face. Olga furrowed her brow slightly and rubbed her forehead. I think I put too much coffee in the cup. I drank it, but my heart is pounding and I have a headache. Maybe I'm getting sick? I feel some strange weakness in my body. I think I'll go to bed early tonight. Hopefully, I'll feel better by morning, Olga said. Sophia didn't say anything. Olga returned to her room, and immediately she approached her computer. She saw Sophia do a couple of dance-like moves, clearly celebrating that her plan had quickly gone into action. Then, Sophia turned on the tap in the sink, as if to wash her hands, but instead, she directed the stream of water into the empty cup to wash away the remnants of the poisoned drink. After that, Sophia went back to her room. Olga couldn't sleep all night, and when she did, she had nightmares that kept waking her up. By 6 in the morning, she couldn't sleep anymore. She couldn't stop thinking about her predicament. How had she ended up in such a situation? Her life now resembled a comedy, a circus, and even a detective story. All that was missing were spectators watching with interest and laughing at particularly amusing moments. Olga hoped for a happy ending. She had no use for drama. At 7 o'clock, Olga got up to get ready for work. Sophia immediately came to the kitchen upon hearing Olga's movements. "How are you feeling?" she asked Olga. Olga looked at her, surprised that Sophia was showing interest. Before this, Sophia couldn't have cared less about Olga's well-being. Had she been waiting for Olga to feel worse, or was she genuinely concerned? And what were those capsules? Why do you care? You'd probably be thrilled if I felt worse. I'm not feeling well. Are you happy now? My heart is pounding, and I have a headache. Maybe I'm getting sick. I feel weak. I think I'll go to the doctor today. It might just be a cold, and I need some rest, Olga said with a smirk. Sophia shrugged irritably. It was clear she wasn't pleased with Olga's condition. "Oh, come on, I don't need this. I'm concerned about my health." "If you're sick, I might need to take precautions," Sophia replied. Olga didn't say anything and made herself some coffee. Then she went to take a shower. 10 minutes later, she came out of the bathroom. Sophia was seated at the table, scrolling through social media news. Olga picked up her dinner plate and coffee cup and headed back to her room. She was enjoying her food while reviewing the video camera footage. 15 minutes ago, Sophia had repeated the same capsule trick, pouring the poison into her coffee. There was nothing else noteworthy in the recordings for the day. Olga made copies of Sophia's actions once again, ensuring they were saved in 3 different places. Then she deleted the other unnecessary recordings and stared at the coffee cup again. Next, she took an empty body lotion bottle from her bag. She often carried it with her to work. Olga emptied its contents into the toilet, rinsed it thoroughly, and then poured all of the poisoned coffee into the empty bottle. She was ready to continue her act. Olga walked into the kitchen, and Sophia watched her with interest. This time, Olga didn't say anything, but she had a look on her face as if she were feeling unwell. Near the sink, she staggered slightly and accidentally bumped into an empty cup on the table. The cup fell to the floor but didn't break. Olga stared at the cup in confusion and said nothing. Sophia furrowed her brow and looked closely at Olga. "What's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell?" Sophia asked. Olga rubbed her eyes and frowned. "Yes, I'm not feeling good again. Maybe I've fallen ill after all." Sophia opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Olga silently went to her room, moving very slowly. She calmly went to sleep, confident that Sophia had taken the bait. The next morning, Olga went to work as usual. This time, Sophia didn't get up in the morning to check on Olga's condition. Olga finished her work and then informed everyone that she would be going to the hospital for a week. She called her doctor and informed him that she would bring her belongings to the hospital in the morning. Olga calmly drove home, preparing for the third act of her performance. When Olga arrived home, Sophia immediately came out of her room. She carefully observed Olga but said nothing. Olga changed her clothes and went to the kitchen. She brewed herself a cup of regular coffee and sat down to drink it right in the kitchen. Olga struggled to contain her laughter when she saw the disappointment on Sophia's face. The woman realized that Olga wasn't going to leave the apartment. Now, she couldn't tamper with Olga's cup anymore. Olga decided not to disappoint her nosy roommate and pretended to make a phone call. She went to her room and called one of her friends. While chatting and pretending to be concerned, Olga discreetly watched what was happening in the kitchen through the surveillance camera. The third act of the drama unfolded as Sophia used the third capsule. Olga saved the recording once again. She finished the conversation with her friend, returned to the kitchen with her cup, and sat down. She poured the remaining coffee into the sink, washed the dishes, and then went back to her room. Around 5 in the morning, Olga went to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and began to groan. After a few minutes, a groggy Sophia emerged from her room. "What's wrong with you? Why don't you let me sleep?" she asked, annoyed. Olga groaned again and mumbled, "I'm not feeling well again. I think I need to go to the hospital. I don't understand what's happening to me. I feel worse and worse every day." Sophia appeared concerned about Olga's condition. "You should definitely go to the hospital. Who knows, maybe it's something contagious." Shaking, Olga slowly made her way back to her room. She packed her bag for the hospital, taking her laptop with her. She had hidden the flash drive with the recordings at work earlier, and she decided to leave nothing of value in her apartment just in case. As she left the apartment, Olga wondered about the twists and turns of this unfolding drama and what surprises might still be in store for her. She hoped that the final act would bring resolution to this bizarre situation and, ideally, benefit her. For now, she didn't have answers to these questions, but Olga was confident that the final act would come sooner than she could anticipate. She arrived at the hospital, where she was placed in a private room. Her doctor happened to be the husband of one of her good friends, and they had been friends for a long time. That's why she ended up in such a comfortable room. Olga asked the doctor to keep her laptop and all her documents in his office. Carlos was very surprised, but Olga told him, "Believe me, right now, this is the most valuable thing I have. And I need it to be safe and sound. I don't want anyone else to get their hands on my belongings. Right here and now, I can only trust you." If Olga had known how timely it was to give her laptop to Carlos, she would have patted herself on the back. Soon, Olga lay down in her hospital room and fell asleep. She woke up around 11 in the morning. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw two figures beside her. At first, Olga didn't even recognize them. Rubbing her eyes, she identified them. It was Sophia and her ex-husband, Sergio. Their expressions were, to put it mildly, quite triumphant. They were definitely rejoicing. Sergio tenderly held his lover's hand, and Sophia held her head high as if she were a queen. When Sergio noticed that his ex-wife had woken up, he smiled slightly and said sweetly, "Well, hello there, dear Olga. I'm very pleased to see you, no matter how ambiguous that may sound. I'm sorry for not answering your calls, I've been a bit busy. But Sophia kept me informed of everything that was happening. So as soon as you went to the hospital, I came over to Sophia's, and we decided to come here to see you. How are you feeling? You fell ill so suddenly." Olga hadn't expected to see them at the hospital. She thought their meeting would take place elsewhere. It was too early for them to confront her. Perhaps Sophia thought she had overdone it with the tablets. Maybe they were afraid she would die before they could resolve everything in their favor. But Olga wasn't planning to die, nor was she going to surrender without a fight. She was ready for battle, and soon it would become clear who would emerge victorious. Olga frowned and weakly replied, "Yes, something is terribly wrong with me. It's as if someone has put a curse on me. I feel fine for half a day, and then I get sick again. The doctors say there's something wrong with my heart, and I need further tests to determine the exact cause. And my back pain has gotten worse too. It's as if everything has hit me all at once. I feel so weak. I can't even get out of bed." Sophia exchanged a quick, concerned glance with Sergio, but he signaled that everything was under control. Then Sergio turned back to Olga and said, "You see, dear, you've now witnessed firsthand the consequences of defying us. Do you see what has happened? Sophia warned you that you would regret it if you didn't do as she asked. She told you she was a witch and that she would cast a spell on you. Well, now you've seen that it's all true, and we weren't joking. The curse will continue to affect you until it kills you, and you won't be able to do anything about it. Although you can do something to save your own life, you'll sell me your share of the apartment. I'm not just asking you to transfer your share to me. No, Olga, I'm not some kind of monster. You'll need a place to live, won't you? So, we'll buy your share of the apartment from you, but for a very modest sum. But don't worry, it should be enough for a small room. I think that should suffice for you. Maybe you'll find someone to share it with, and you'll even be able to buy a one-bedroom apartment. But I understand that you don't have anyone right now. Sophia would have known about it. So, for now, a single room will have to do for you. But as soon as you sign the contract, Sophia will remove the curse, and you'll be healthy and full of energy again. So, what do you think of this arrangement? I believe it's quite fair. Don't you agree? For good health, one must pay a price, and you'll pay it to us. Are you ready to sign the papers? Olga listened to her ex-husband and was amazed at how calculating he was. They had come with the expectation that Olga would immediately sign the necessary papers. Naturally, she would start feeling completely healthy tomorrow as the effects of the poisonous pills would cease. And she wouldn't receive any more doses. How calculating and greedy these two were. They were cut from the same cloth. For so many years, Sergio had hidden his true nature, but now Olga saw his true face. It was lit with greed and triumph. He wanted power and humiliation to take and destroy. And right now, he looked so happy. Olga had never seen him so happy before. All these years, she had lived with someone who pretended to be someone else. The person she had wanted to see in him. Olga realized there was no point in pretending anymore. She pushed herself up in bed and sat more comfortably. Her face immediately took on a different expression. She squinted her eyes and asked, "I have only one question. How does Sophia Santos, plan to lift the curse? Probably with red capsules, right?" Sophia paled and looked at Sergio. The smile froze on his face. "Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? If you poisoned me with blue capsules, then the antidote would be red ones, wouldn't it? Oh, why am I so silly? You're not planning to give me an antidote. You'll just stop slipping the contents of those little blue pills into my coffee, right? And I'll immediately start feeling better. And I'll believe that I was indeed cursed by Sophia Santos, the great witch in the 7th generation. But before that, I'll sign your prepared contract, and you'll pay me the promised pennies. And you'll get the apartment, and I'll be out on the street. Is that right? You'll celebrate your triumph, and I'll spend my life in a small room. Maybe I'll even drink myself to death, which should delight you. Well, why are you silent? Did I get it all right? Or are there some inaccuracies? I might be mistaken about some details, but overall, I'm right, aren't I?" Sergio turned purple with anger, and Sophia turned pale. They both breathed heavily. Sergio's lover was ready to pounce on Olga and scratch her throat, strangle her, beat her. But then Sergio regained his composure. He grabbed Sophia's hand and said angrily, "What nonsense is this? You're delusional. It's all in your imagination. There's nothing of the sort. There were no tablets. It's just the effect of the curse. And no one will believe you." Olga laughed. For the first time in a long time, she felt so confident. Fear was evident on the faces of the two lovers. They were clearly afraid. So, there was something they should be afraid of. So Olga was on the right track. Olga crossed her arms over her chest and said, "Do you think I'm a fool? I saw all of this. I know that Sophia was putting tablets in my coffee. Do you think I drank it? No, of course not. I realized right away that your lover didn't just show up here for no reason. I immediately figured out that you were up to something. I just couldn't understand exactly what exactly. And then it all fell into place. I understood everything. I already knew that I wouldn't allow myself to be deceived any longer." Sergio was furious. He didn't expect his ex-wife to find out everything. "You won't prove anything. If you tell anyone, we'll deny everything, and no one will believe you. You'd better not delay and sell us your share," he whispered angrily. But Olga only smiled in response. "My dear, I can prove everything. I have a video recording of Sophia putting tablets in my coffee. I have all 3 recordings. I anticipated that you might come up with something like this, so I installed a surveillance camera in the kitchen. Oh, I see you're surprised and scared. Well, that's very good. And don't even think about searching my room or the entire apartment. Of course, you'll find the camera, but I've saved all the recordings in 3 different places. You won't find anything at home, and besides, one copy is already with a friend of mine who happens to be an investigator. I've already filed a report, and it's signed by me. If anything happens to me, the case will immediately proceed, and both of you will end up behind bars for good. Do you understand everything, or should I call my investigator friend to confirm what I've said? Well, should I call him? Sergio and Sofia were completely stunned. They hadn't expected this turn of events. Their plan had collapsed like a house of cards. And it was Olga herself who had destroyed it, now looking at them with mockery. For a while, Sergio contemplated how to extricate himself from this situation with minimal loss. He looked around but didn't see his ex-wife's laptop anywhere. Olga was delighted that she had entrusted it to the doctor for safekeeping. Finally, Sergio decided that he needed to act very quickly, or Olga might come up with her own version. Fine, you win. We'll leave immediately and won't show up here again. Sofia will retrieve her things from the apartment and move out. You can return to the apartment without any worries. We won't bother you anymore. Just give us that recording and take back your report. Olga raised her eyebrows in surprise. Are you taking me for a fool again, Sergio? You know I'm not like that at all, or have you completely lost your mind? Sergio spat on the floor with contempt and hissed. So what else do you want, then? You want me to give you my share of the apartment? Is that what you want? Did I guess it right? Fine. You've got what you wanted. We'll give you the whole apartment. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. I've never met a more disgusting woman than you. We'll sign the contract, and then you'll give me all the video recordings. But this time, Olga shook her head. No, Sergio, I don't need that apartment. I want something completely different. You see, for all your tricks, I could have not only thrown both of you in jail, but also taken everything from you. But I'm not like you, and I only need my fair share. That's what I want. Don't you understand me? I know you deceived me. I know you stashed away all our money that we saved up monthly and told me you lost it all. Before, I offered you 2 options, either the apartment for you and the money for me, or the other way around. But now, I only want my money, and I'll give the apartment to you completely. I don't need it anymore. It holds too many unpleasant memories for me. I won't be happy living there anymore. You and your Sofia Santos defiled it. Now you can live there alone. You can even keep everything that's in it. I'll take only my clothes and the money, of course. This is my final decision, and there's no room for negotiation. Once the money is in my account, I'll destroy all the recordings, and you'll never see me again. I'll move to another city. Sergio had nothing to say. He realized that Olga wouldn't believe him anyway. Sergio and Sofia exchanged glances, and Olga left them without a choice. They understood that they had lost. And if they didn't agree to her terms, they would lose much more. Sergio turned to his ex-wife and grumbled. We agree. When Olga left the hospital a week later, everything was already settled, the documents were signed, and a substantial sum of money was in her account. She only needed to collect her belongings from the apartment, and that's what she did. Sergio and Sofia were waiting for her at the apartment. Olga handed over her keys to them. The lovers watched Olga grimly as she calmly packed her clothes into suitcases. Olga didn't admit to them that the whole story with the coffee, the investigator, and the written statement was fabricated. Of course, Olga took a risk by telling them all of this to their faces, as they might not believe her. But she was lucky, she hadn't been wrong, and everything turned out the way she wanted. Olga packed her things very quickly. When she brought all the suitcases down to the landing, she glanced at her ex-husband and the woman she had been forced to share her apartment with one last time. These two had almost turned her life into a living hell. And Olga considered herself fortunate that it had all ended this way. She wished for them never to cross her path again, and that's why she wanted to move to another city. She looked at Sergio, then at Sofia, who looked sad. Goodbye. She didn't say anything else, and the lovers didn't respond either. When Olga brought her suitcases downstairs, she left 3 of them by the taxi while she dragged the other 2 towards the trash bin. These were unwanted items, and she separated them. When Olga left the suitcases by the trash bin, she felt a tremendous sense of relief, as if she had finally rid herself of a heavy burden. And that's exactly what it was. Olga was leaving her past behind. Some time ago, she had been in touch with her university friend, Andrea. Andrea had her own company and was looking for an assistant. She offered Olga the position, but Olga needed time to think about it. But now Olga didn't hesitate anymore. She had called Andrea yesterday and agreed to the job. Her friend was thrilled and said she was waiting for her right away. This morning, Olga booked a flight ticket. She planned to go directly to the airport from here to start her new life in another city. She had already called her previous workplace and shared the news. She had money, and she didn't even need to look for a job. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Olga took one last look at the suitcases and then walked back. The taxi driver looked at her questioningly. "You can put them in the car," she told the driver. He quickly loaded 2 suitcases into the trunk, placing one on the back seat. Olga got into the car, and the taxi driver started the engine, asking her, "Where are we going, madam?" "To a new life," Olga replied quietly, looking ahead. "Where to, exactly?" The driver asked again. Olga looked at him and smiled. "I'm sorry. Please take me to the airport." 3 years passed. Olga was sitting in a taxi, gazing out the window with curiosity. The city looked almost the same as it did 3 years ago. It was her first time returning here since she left. She hadn't wanted to come back to her hometown. It was no longer home to her. She had become truly happy where she was living now. She had found love, was about to get married soon, had a prestigious job, and had made new loyal friends. Everything was going well for her, but Laurencia had tearfully begged her to come for her birthday. Olga couldn't refuse her friend's request. As they drove down the central street, Olga sadly noticed that many buildings were in poor condition. They needed urgent repairs, but no one seemed to be in a hurry to address the issue. The city was deteriorating, as sad as it was to admit. However, what did it matter to her? She no longer lived here, and she would never return, that was certain. They arrived at the designated building, and Olga paid the taxi driver generously, leaving her suitcases by the bench. "I can help you carry them to the apartment," he politely offered. But Olga shook her head with a smile. "No need, my friends will meet me." "Thank you. Goodbye." The driver bid her farewell politely and drove away, leaving Olga sitting on the bench. She wanted to sit for a while and enjoy the fresh air before calling Laurencia. After moving, Olga lived with Andrea for a while, but she quickly found a suitable apartment for herself. It was even better than the one she and Sergio had lived in. This apartment was cozier, more spacious, and brighter. Of course, it was more expensive, but it was in a new complex. Andrea had covered the amount Olga was short of, and Olga quickly repaid her debt. In a short time, Andrea had brought Olga up to speed, and within a few months, Olga had become a professional. Now that she enjoyed her work, even though it made her tired, she knew she would be rewarded for it. She had to learn to live for herself again, as Sergio had never allowed her to spend money on herself. At first, it was challenging for her to make purchases. But every day she worked on herself, and in the end, she was able to change. Now she was a completely different Olga, and she looked entirely different. 2 years after her move, Olga met a man. It happened at Andrea's birthday party, when she invited her friends and acquaintances to a large yacht party. They partied until nearly morning, and that's where Olga met Rosendo. He was a friend of Andrea's husband, and Olga hadn't met him before because he had been living in Europe. Now he had returned to his home country. There was an instant connection between them, and they started dating. Although Olga hadn't planned on it, she couldn't resist him. She also missed being held in a man's arms. Moreover, she longed for someone to truly love her. They fell in love with each other, and eventually Rosendo proposed to her. Olga said yes. Her life had changed dramatically, and she never looked back at her past. That's why she didn't want to come back to this city. She didn't want to remember anything, but she couldn't refuse Laurencia. Olga! She heard a voice from above. She looked up and saw Laurencia on the balcony, waving at her. I'll come in a moment, Laurencia shouted. Laurencia and her husband quickly descended. Her husband picked up Olga's suitcases, and the two women sat down on the bench. They wanted to speak privately for a while. I'm so glad you came, my dear. Olga smiled. You know, I'm probably glad too. I needed this, Laurencia replied. How are things with Rosendo? He hasn't run away from you yet? Laurencia joked. No, not at all. In fact, he proposed to me, and we're getting married soon. When we set a date, I'll invite you and your husband to the wedding. Will you come to my wedding, Laurencia? Promise that you'll be there with me at such an important moment. Laurencia took Olga's hand. Silly, why would I need your tickets? You don't need to pay for anything. Of course, I'll come. What silly questions? How could I leave you at such a significant moment? I didn't leave you the first time, and I won't leave you again. Olga frowned slightly. When Laurencia mentioned Olga's first marriage with Sergio, she immediately bit her tongue. Why did she have to bring that up? Olga had asked her not to mention Sergio or tell her anything about him. I'm sorry, Olga, I forgot, Laurencia apologized. It's okay. They both fell silent, lost in their own thoughts. Then Olga hesitantly asked, Do you know anything about him? Laurencia understood that Olga was referring to Sergio. She nodded. Yes, I know everything about him. But you asked me not to mention him or tell you anything. So I'm keeping quiet. Olga bit her lip, and then she asked uncertainly, Well, how are they doing with Sophia? Maybe they've had children by now? Laurencia glanced at her friend and asked, Do you really want to know? Do you want me to tell you everything I know? Believe me, it's not what you expect to hear. Olga wanted to shake her head, but Laurencia spoke with such intrigue that curiosity got the better of her. Okay, go ahead, tell me. And Laurencia began to tell her. Sergio lived with Sophia only for half a year, and they were not easy months. When she was his mistress, it was one thing, but as his wife, he couldn't stand her for long. Sophia was not like Olga, who almost always agreed with her husband. Sophia had no intention of giving Sergio her entire salary, and he didn't like that. He thought he could boss Sophia around just like he did with his ex-wife, but he was in for a terrible disappointment. Sophia had no intention of dancing to his tune, and she constantly reminded him, You deceived your wife, what's stopping you from deceiving me too? Are you planning to betray me as well? It won't work, I won't allow it. And Sophia lived by her own rules and didn't report to Sergio where she had been or how she spent her money. This infuriated Sergio, and they began to have constant quarrels. Sergio even resorted to raising his hand against Sophia, and she responded in kind. Neighbors often complained about them and even filed police reports, but nothing changed. They argued every evening, and then there would be passionate reconciliation at night, but the same situation would repeat itself the following day. Oh my God, he never behaved like this with me, Olga whispered softly. That's because you put up with him, but Sophia refused to submit to him. She made it clear right away that she didn't want to marry him, Laurencia replied. And then even stranger and scarier things happened. Sergio got tired of Sophia, and she found herself a lover. He was part of some criminal gang, and after a while, she told her common-law husband that she had sold her share of the apartment, which Sergio had given her as a gift a long time ago. They never transferred the ownership documents. Sergio had transferred his ex-wife's share of the apartment to his name, but his own share was legally given to his lover. It was all officially documented. So, Sophia sold her part of the apartment to some gangsters. She moved in with her new lover, and Sergio was left alone with two large gangsters who came to live with him instead of Sofia. Oh, he had to endure so much. Until these gangsters kicked him out of the apartment, he didn't calm down. Sergio practically gave away his share of the apartment for next to nothing. Good Lord! Olga exclaimed. Sergio managed to buy a tiny room with that money. It was a tiny space where there was hardly any room for furniture. He still lives there. He constantly argues with neighbors who bang on the walls every time he's just talking on the phone. The soundproofing in the apartment was excellent. Sergio works, but is slowly deteriorating into alcoholism. He believes his life has been a failure because he kept encountering the wrong women. He still thinks he'll meet his true love, who will unquestionably obey him and fulfill all his desires. Olga shook her head. I hope he never meets such a woman. I wouldn't wish that tyrant on any woman in the world. How do you know all of this? My husband keeps in touch with him. He told me everything, Laurencia replied. They fell silent. Then Olga spoke softly. What do you think would have happened to me if I were still with him? Laurencia furrowed her brow and, after some thought, answered. I don't know, but nothing good, that's for sure. I'm so glad you two broke up. Even though you're far from me, I'm so glad you're happy. Olga and Laurencia hugged. I'm glad too, Olga replied. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Laurencia suddenly perked up. Oh, I forgot. You're probably tired from the road. Do you want to eat? I've kept you outside for so long. Let's go. I'll feed you and tell you our plans for the 4 days you'll be visiting me. Olga shook off her heavy thoughts, her past with her first husband fading into the background. She cleared her mind of thoughts about Sergio. Well, he got what he deserved, and that's that. He wanted Olga to be left with nothing, but he ended up at rock bottom himself. He found himself in the exact situation he had wanted to put Olga in, and he had no one to blame but himself. Olga shook her head and said cheerfully, Oh, I'm not really tired. Maybe we'll have breakfast, and then we can go shopping. I want to buy you a gift for your anniversary. I want to get you the most beautiful dress in the city so you can shine brighter than anyone at your celebration. Laurencia burst into laughter, throwing her head back. She was so happy that her friend had come to visit. Olga smiled as she looked at her friend. They were going to have a wonderful weekend. Then Olga would return to her own life, her fiancé, and her beloved job. Everything would be just fine for her. Everything would be wonderful.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.